Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a video and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Today, I'm delighted to welcome a very accomplished individual, not just in filmmaking, but also as an activist, Insia Dariwala. Insia, welcome to the show. And
Thank you.
Thank you. Insia is from Mumbai, and she's an award-winning international filmmaker. She's made 10 documentary films and 2 short fictions. She's a TEDx and public speaker at many international and domestic conferences. She's a child rights activist, highlighting social evils like child sex abuse and female genital cutting. She's been recognized and awarded globally, and she is one of the 100 most inspiring women of India. So, Insia, tell me, what would you say are 3 key milestones in your career or your life?
So let's start with life because career comes later.
Okay.
I think the first key milestone was the day I got to know that I was born in the train.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that kind of changed the entire narrative of my life. I realized that my life was never going to be ordinary. And so that was knowing the way I was born was the first key milestone. My second was when my family immigrated to the United States. This is when I was 19 years old.
Okay.
So I started my journey in a very modest 100 square feet home. And so from there to go from a small little village, out on the outskirts of Mumbai, and then at that age, that impressionable age, to go straight into a concrete jungle like New York was a very big milestone for me. It just changed entire course of my life. The third milestone in my life, I don't know. I think I'm living it right now.
Okay.
This last 3 years have given me many different kind of highs in life, and they are linked to my career. But I think my career is not just a career; it is a passion. It is something that has become me, and so they are interconnected. So I'll just jump into the career part of it. And my first key milestone in my career was the day I made my first film on child sexual abuse, The Candyman. This is 2009. So definitely a key milestone, especially when I won 2 Best Director awards for the film. It kind of reiterated the fact that I can tell a story effectively.
Well said. Yeah.
So that was extremely important in my career. Second milestone, I would say, was my second film, which was again on sexual violence. And the reason why I consider that a major milestone is because that kind of set stage for my NGO. That's how my NGO was born, after that film.
Okay.
And the third milestone would be the day the WCD ministry, which is the Women and Child Ministry, based on a petition and a photo campaign that I had run through the Hands of Hope Foundation, came out and acknowledged that male child sexual abuse is in fact not something that has been talked about, studied about. That photo campaign, that very little small photo campaign, which had 5 faces of male survivors, went on to amend a compensation scheme, which was, which the government had in place. And it started giving compensation to survivors of sexual abuse who were boys as well. So that was a definite key milestone in my career.
Very interesting. I'm going to speak first about your filmmaking. Let's talk about filmmaking. What got you into filmmaking, and then tell me after that about your documentary, which Till Death Do Us Apart.
I don't think anything gets you into anything. It's either you are or you're not. Okay. And I was a storyteller right from childhood. I always joke about this, that I used to tell great stories at home to get away from punishment. So I always knew that I knew how to read stories, and the kind of life that I lived as a child. Stories was my only getaway. My imagination, my creativity was the only way that I could survive the reality that I lived at that time. And so as I grew older, it was only natural that craft kind of, it just grew inside of me. And then at one point in time, I started writing. I started doing well at what I was doing.
So, Insia, continuing in your role as a director and as a filmmaker, What were some of your main challenges as you got into this part of work?
I don't know. I would like to think that I've been lucky. I really didn't have to face too many challenges like most outsiders face in the film industry. God has been very kind. I have always had producers offer me work as opposed to me looking for work, and that has been something that I always am very grateful to God for. So all the work that I've got so far has been because someone has approached me to do a film, you know.
Okay.
So I don't, I mean, challenges are, you know, like being a woman. Are you asking me that question, or is it something
I'm
that
just
is
asking you a question as a film director?
No, I think as a documentary filmmaker, there are challenges because see, when you are doing documentary films, it's a very different ballgame. You are not controlling the environment over there.
Right.
So, as in fiction, there is a script in place. You know what scenes you're going to do way before the shoot happens. Your crew is ready for everything. All of that is happening. But in a documentary film, it's like you just your structure. You know what you want your end and your beginning to be. But then the middle portion, you don't know how to. What's going to happen. So, if I just were to speak about the film that I made recently, which was Till Death Do Us Part, my first feature documentary film, those challenges are something that I will never forget because one, the film, more than 50% of the film was in Telugu. Okay. I don't know that language.
Wow.
And why in Telugu? Because the film was shot in Andhra Pradesh, in different places of Andhra Pradesh. So language, being that it was not my language, it became extremely difficult to communicate. So that was definitely challenging. Then, it was like a whole new world for me. But what I realized in that process is that, pain has no language. Pain is a universal feeling. Love is a universal feeling. Right. And if you could connect compassion and all of these feelings, if you connect on that, then I don't think language becomes a barrier. But because we were dealing with domestic violence and sexual violence with children, it was a very, very traumatic experience, I would say, for me and my crew, because what we heard, what we saw was something that was unbelievable. It was, it took us a long time to digest what we had just shot. And that was challenging.
Very interesting.
If you talk about challenges as a director, I think in a documentary film, while shooting documentary films, the challenges are much different and more, I would say.
Wonderful. And given the fact that producers are now reaching out to you and giving you more work, as you say, any chance of or any plans to move into mainstream filmmaking? So
I don't like to categorize films, honestly, because I think a film is a film. The only difference is that my film does not have a Shah Rukh Khan, So, but if you look at domestic violence, I mean, Thappad was a film that was on, domestic violence. I'm sure before that also many films mainstream. But what is mainstream actually? Mainstream is something that, is it something that has a star in it, or is it something that has acceptance from audience? So documentary films in India are gaining acceptance now. I do fiction, yes. And I am writing, I've written some scripts, but I'm not like desperately going out there because I'm running two NGOs as well. Yeah. So I'm kind of, torn apart between these two facets of my life. Sure. However, this year I have resolved to kind of balance, so if there is any producer out there listening, yes, I have fiction and I have mainstream films. So,
okay,
feel free to approach me.
Well said. Well said. So now let's talk about your NGOs on child rights.
Yeah.
When I was first introduced to you, I did some reading up. I can't say I knew too much about abuse and child abuse in our country, but I understand that there are over 32,000 cases reported every year. How rampant is child abuse in our country?
So Ashutosh, I'm sure since you have been doing your research, you must have come across a research from the government, which was done in 2007. Yeah. The WCD ministry had done this research.
Right.
And in that research, it was a statistic that was released, which said that more than 52% 2% of India's children are sexually abused.
Wow.
So that means every other child is sexually abused. So the numbers are huge. I mean, goes without saying that we are looking at a pandemic, even if I may say so, and if I may use that word now. You know?
Yeah. Okay. And what are the symptoms to look for if there is abuse of a child?
So I would not call it symptoms because it's not a disease.
Okay.
I would call it signs.
Okay.
What do you need to watch out for in a child?
So
first of all, let's say there is a child who's extremely, happy-go-lucky, very chirpy, fun-loving person. And then suddenly overnight, the child has now changed to become a very aloof kind of a kid who doesn't want to interact, who doesn't want to talk to anybody, who's scared, doesn't want to go to school maybe. So these are all signs that if there are any sudden changes in a child's behavior, I think that needs to be flagged.
Okay.
If there are, so these are behavioral changes, right? Then there are physical changes. Like let's say if you have spotted a child getting, who's perhaps in the private parts bleeding, or if there is any kind of intimation that a child is feeling uncomfortable physically or does not want to perform certain things, like maybe not want someone to bathe him or her. These are all signs as well.
Okay.
So I think there are emotional behaviors that needs to be flagged off. There is physical changes. There is, behavioral changes. Bedwetting, nightmares, being afraid of a certain person around, them. These are all signs that there is something going on. Or if a child doesn't want to go to school, let's say the abuse has happened somewhere out of home, and the child doesn't want to go to school or to play. These are also signs that one needs to be aware of.
Wow, thank you. That's amazing information. So just before, in the early part of the information, our conversation, you did speak about male child abuse.
Right.
Why are we in denial in India about male child abuse?
For me, I think the biggest is the one, we do not want to accept that men can be raped, okay, and boys can be raped.
Right.
We do not want to even look at the possibilities of boys being sexually abused as children. Third, again, I mean, so this is all if I were to just sum it up in one word, it's denial, right? It's society's denial to acknowledge that a boy can be sexually abused or raped.
And is it getting any better now with all the representations? Is there more awareness?
Awareness, yes. But awareness doesn't always lead to, action. So everybody is aware today. A lot of people are aware about male child sexual abuse.
Okay.
But that's not necessarily translating to action in the domain that it needs to be utilized.
Okay. And what role is the government and society going to play in the entire child rights?
They are already playing. I think government has laws in place. Government has amended the laws quite a bit to reflect how a child can be protected better. In the past years, it has been making amendment over amendment. Laws can only help if they are implemented, if there is reporting happening, if there are cases filed, then. Otherwise, it's just a law.
Okay. And when you find such cases, and please ignore my English, I'm not very good in English, but please, when you are confronted with such issues, how does the community react?
The community that where the child is being abused.
Yeah, where the child is living and has been abused. Is there normally a tendency to cover it up, or is it something which people, the seniors or elders, are willing to address?
Most of the times not. They are not willing to address it. There is a lot of secrecy that is involved. There's a lot of desire to hush it up. So I don't think people, like I said, people do not want to acknowledge the existence of child sexual abuse. Whether it's a girl, boy, it doesn't matter. We do not want to believe that this exists. And when we are confronted with something like that, we want to believe that we can just go past it. Okay. So there are lots of incidents where parents or family members will say that it's okay, she will get over it or he will get over it. बड़ा हो जाएगा तो सब ठीक हो जाएगा. But there are in metros, I would say, you can see a little bit more action on this, and people are aware, like you said. Their children are going to schools where good touch, bad touch is being taught. So they are more aware, parents are more aware, and they definitely I would assume, would be much more careful and action oriented in the case of an event. But most of the times, it is a very difficult situation where a parent may not want to, or a family member may not want to address the presence of child sexual abuse in the family, especially. And most of the cases are happening in families, in trusted circles, because there is easier access to children. So when there are cases happening in families, obviously you're more concerned about the honor of the family, and कि क्या होगा if you go to the cops, badnami hogi. So these are all reasons why a family would not want to support.
Okay. My next question is that when there are children who face trauma, this kind, what is the kind of support that is normally given to them by the family and by other NGOs?
So, like I said, we'll start with families. Okay, if the family is attending to the case right from the start and is following everything that's needed for the child, for the well-being of the child, then there are different things that are happening depending on the intensity of the abuse as well. Right? So not all of the times the abuse is physically very grave, but the emotional impact nonetheless is there. So the child would need to get counseling, to heal, to see how much the impact is. The parents would need to be counseled as well to handle the child's situation. So these are things that would happen. NGOs come into place. Like, let's say if there is a case and an NGO is approached. At that time, the first thing that an NGO does is obviously help the family filing a case, if they know the perpetrator. If they don't know the perpetrator, then the child abuse survivor is questioned in the presence of the parents. There has to be a minor is always accompanied by parents during this entire exercise. If there is a physical damage, then they are accompanied to the hospital which deals with cases like this. There is a police case that happens. There are follow-ups that happen. There are NGOs. There are a lot of big NGOs. Arpan coming to mind first, actually, who provides free counseling for these children, and they do a wonderful job at that. So NGOs, and so it is like you have to coexist together. The system and the families, the community and the system has to coexist, and they have to come together to address an issue. Otherwise, it's not going to go, because it's a lengthy process, right from the time the child is sexually abused till the time when the child is, possibly on the way to recovery and healing. But in that phase, if you have not addressed the child in the best way possible, then we are looking at a long-term damage on the emotional and mental well-being of the child.
Thank you. So I'm going to move to the last segment of our conversation, which is some questions for you personally. I have time for 2 more questions with you.
Sure.
You're a filmmaker on one side, you're an activist and for a very, very sensitive subject in our country today. As you look at everything that you are doing, what does success mean to you?
So for me, success is if I can go to bed thinking that I've done my best today, that I have, in my own small way, made a dent in the things that I want to change to make this society better. For me, that is success. Because other than that, it really doesn't matter. You could be hoarding tons of money, you could be doing so much for yourself, but if you are not able to have a good night's sleep, I think it's a waste. So I'm a little philosophical on these things, but that's what I feel.
Okay. And my last question to you is on failure. I've often said that parents in India, or for that matter South Asia, don't teach children it's okay to fail. It's always come first, be at the head of the line, etc., etc. Yet we fail. So my question to you is, what have been some of your biggest learnings from some of your mistakes?
So again, Ashutosh, I do not look at failure and success in the same way that most people do. I don't even call them failures, actually. I call them challenges of life. And there is no right or wrong, right? So if I were to just talk about my own journey, I studied to become, I did my BCom in India. When I was in the US, I did advertising and mass comm. And today I can safely say that none of it has gone to waste, because I am using all of that in my work that I'm doing with both my NGOs, whether it's the Hands of Hope Foundation or SAYO. Both are working on child rights, issues. One is working on sexual abuse, the other is working on female genital mutilation. My films reflect that as well. So it has all kind of, helped and worked. So I look at them as lessons. We learn lessons as we go along. Like if I were to say a small anecdote, now we are doing one of the biggest things that we have ever done through the Hands of Hope Foundation, which is the first ever pan-India marathon. Okay. We don't know what's the right way or the wrong way to do this. We are just doing it. My event director Pranav, he's doing it because he's a runner himself. We are trying, and I think that's what matters, that we try. We do not let the challenges and the lessons learned stop us. So, and I feel that I do not have any regrets in life. I do my best, and I think that's what makes me believe that there is no failure. There are only experiences, there are only learnings. The bottom line is to not repeat the same mistakes as you go forward, and at least try, if nothing else, right? And that's all you can do.
Thank you. Insia, thank you very much. It's been such a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.